I'm coming at this from a how can we help these people angle. I am not judging. I am not saying, oh my God, haha, these people are ridiculous. I think this is actually a problem that we should probably address.
No, you aren't supporting, investing, or organizing your community to uplift the most marginalized if you're still not masking. Our liberation has always been connected. The continued rise of fascism is directly connected to Palestine, Sudan, Congo, losing reproductive rights, anti-trans violence, xenophobia, and yes, COVID. Being okay with disabled and immunocompromised folks dying for your convenience is not very progressive of you, especially when we know repeat infections can cause lifelong damage for all of us. If you are unable to handle the inconvenience of wearing a mask to protect your community, how much are you really willing to personally invest in the liberation of marginalized people? That being said, it's never too late to start masking again and taking more precautions, but it is too late for the millions of folks who died because of our government's complete mishandling of a global pandemic that continues to still take lives every day. Bye, friends.
So you might have seen a lot of this. I've seen a lot of this where people, they will insert like COVID stuff, masking. They will insert COVID into pretty much every cause, every issue. Even with this one, where it's essentially like, you're not supporting Palestine unless you're masking. I mentioned this once before, but like there was this one weird, probably a Fed account, Marxist account, that was literally like, masking will fight capitalism or something. So they're attaching the COVID shit to like every other topic. And like, I want to talk about that for a second because I legitimately think that COVID as an event, and completely understandably, I'm not being like these people are ridiculous, haha. I feel like this is like a moment where we have to actually like think about helping these people and think about the gross missteps in this event that our leaders took. I think this might have caused like an actual mental illness to develop in people who exhibit this behavior. I'm going to go over an article from Psychology Today that kind of makes a bit of a case for it. COVID for a lot of people most likely was a traumatic event. And one downside of trauma is that it can possibly, it can kind of stick you in the area where you were traumatized. And you kind of are forced to always kind of relive that time period. That's why a lot of people who were traumatized at a young age do not develop emotionally, don't develop empathy. In the case of a lot of personality disorders, there's a very strong link to childhood trauma, and that's because a part of you gets stuck at that moment. It isn't able to move on. And I'd like to explore the possibility that COVID may have caused that to a lot of people. Because I'm seeing a lot of this where, you guys have probably seen it too, where people are still stuck in like 2020. They're still stuck in like 2020, 2021. Or they're still like panicking. I've seen people who talk about like not being able to leave their house. I know people who won't leave their house still because of COVID. Like they're perpetually stuck. It doesn't matter how many precautions they take, how many medical treatments they take. They're just like, it's this constant boogeyman that's always haunting them in the back of their mind. So I'm going to share this article. I really like Psychology Today. I think in terms of Psychology Today in a lot of ways is the Stalin of psychological resources. As Stalin is to like theory, insofar as like, it's really good at like breaking it down into like digestible chunks if you're not like a massive psych nerd like myself. So we're going to go through it. Is COVID-19 a traumatic event? Make it bigger once more here. Trauma has many definitions, but Trauma has many definitions, but often involves an emotional response to an overwhelming event, a loss of agency, and an altered sense of safety. All three of those are true. All three of those happened. COVID-19 acts as a traumatic stressor in multiple ways and has changed many people's sense of control, safety, and views of the world. Even as people learn to adapt to pandemic life, recovering may mean targeting the world's collective trauma response. Which again, I'm not approaching this from like a mean-spirited or holding any malice. I think we might need to start thinking about how to address this, because I still see a lot of people who they're not doing okay. You shouldn't be inserting COVID into like every facet of every issue, because it shouldn't dominate your brain that hard. 18 months into the pandemic, and we're all dealing with the mental, physical, and emotional repercussions, whatever that may be for you. Now, this article is back in 2021, but I think it still holds true. It's no secret that the COVID-19 pandemic has taken a toll on our mental health. Since the start of quarantine in 2020, rates of anxiety, depression, burnout, grief, and beyond have skyrocketed. But the conversation about mental health doesn't stop when coronavirus is a distant memory. What happens mentally after a reality-shattering experience like this one? How does it shape our daily lives or the way we perceive the world around us? More importantly, how can we recover in a way that takes the unprecedented, apologies if that's the 2000th time you've heard that word in 1.5 years, impact of this pandemic into account? One way is to look at COVID-19 not just as a virus, but as a worldwide traumatic event, which I agree with. What is trauma? Little bit of education for people right here. Trauma is many things, but clearly defined is certainly not one of them. We often see trauma associated with veterans, sexual assault survivors, hurricane victims, etc. We also typically see trauma in diagnoses of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. That makes sense, being that experiencing trauma is a key factor in a PTSD diagnosis. Depending on the context you are in, though, you will likely find a different definition of trauma, its causes, and its effects. If you ask the American Psychological Association, APA, they will tell you that trauma is an emotional response to a terrible event like an accident, rape, or natural disaster. However, if you ask trauma researcher Bessel van der Kolk, he might say that trauma is an experience that basically leaves people stuck in a state of helplessness and terror. Yeah. Mind and brain become overwhelmed, resulting in a change over how you perceive danger and what you consider relevant and irrelevant to your survival. We see a lot of similarities across definitions, but there is more gray area than not. This requires us to tease apart these definitions if we are going to understand what is happening to countless people across the globe. Excuse me. Essentially, we can think of trauma as our body and mind's reaction to an event that takes away our sense of agency. I didn't pre-read this. And that changes our perception of safety. This reaction can manifest differently depending on the person, the nature of the trauma, whether a trauma happened one time or over many years, and so on. It might manifest as being hypervigilant of your surroundings. Physical symptoms like a racing heart or nausea, reliving the traumatic experience through flashbacks or nightmares, trouble regulating your emotions, or even not feeling any emotions at all. A process that is normally called derealization or dissociation. Okay? Some individuals don't even remember the events due to the brain's attempt at Some individuals don't even remember the events due to the brain's attempt at protecting us from them. With all that being said, where does COVID-19 fit? COVID-19 is a traumatic event. We are already seeing the unique effects of this pandemic on our mental well-being. Early studies are beginning to explore which aspects of the pandemic might create risk for traumatic stress disorders. And while all of us might not be eligible for a diagnosis of PTSD, the experience of COVID-19 has absolutely left its mark. So this is a study from PLOS ONE. Why the COVID-19 pandemic is a traumatic stressor. On one hand, COVID-19 has been a compilation of separate events that are more commonly understood to be traumatic. Millions across the world have lost loved ones to coronavirus. For those that contracted the virus and survives, it could have meant long, terrifying stays in the hospital or impairing symptoms that have lasted beyond ER. Outside of the actual virus, countless people lost their jobs when lockdown struck, including my wife, leading to financial instability, food insecurity, and potentially loss of housing. On the other hand, the pandemic had its own acts in many ways as a stressor. Let's consider the common pieces of trauma: loss of agency, physical and mental overwhelm, altered perception of safety, and of course, a significant psychological response to those things. It's safe to say that COVID-19 checks those boxes. Many of us are feeling a loss of control, not only because of quarantine, but because the course of the pandemic is being driven by the choices of the whole world, not just a few individuals. This leaves uncertainty at just about every turn. The same goes for altered perceptions of safety. It's nearly impossible to feel safe when there is a perpetual risk of illness, loss of loved ones, financial hardship, and so on. As for the mental, emotional response to those things, take a moment and think back to pre-pandemic life. How does that compare to how you view your day-to-day now? This is really important. Because think of how many people, it could be you, and I'm not judging, okay? It's completely understandable. I get you. Think about how many people are just forever changed because of this event. And now think of how many people are still living that event. Whether it's in real life, someone you know, whether it's on social media, there's plenty of examples there. Case in point, that video we just saw, where they're trying to tie masking to supporting Palestine. They're trying to equate wearing PPE to an ongoing genocide. Like they're trying to piggyback COVID to pretty much everything. So again, I approach this with compassion. Recently, a friend said to me, "Can you believe that we used to just get onto a crowded train to get to work, fully packed in like sardines? Someone in the back would cough and I may think, oh, they have a cold. Isn't that wild? The other day I took the train and when someone coughed, I flinched. I was so tense the whole ride after that." And again, some people are still living that in 2024, right now. This is not an uncommon experience. People who have never had an issue being out and about are now anxious and hyper aware of their surroundings in public places. A lot of individuals are fixating on commonly normal physical symptoms. Are these allergies, the flu, and others so worn down after the psychological stress of the last 18 months are finding that they either can't stop crying at every new piece of news or can't be bothered to feel everything at all. Again, dissociation, which is likely a trauma response. Now what? Okay, so I have a bit of a different now what here. Okay? I don't know if it's completely necessary to like reshape the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. That's essentially considered the Bible for mental disorders here in the West, at least. I don't know if we need to do that. But what I do think we need to do as a society is we need to have more mental health resources, and we need to consider these people more than we already do, because I'm sure you've seen a post. Someone is hysterical about COVID. They're freaking out. They're being a little on the ridiculous side, and there's a bunch of people mocking them and laughing at them. That's not what we need. Okay? That's not what we need to do. I think we need to start considering this as a serious event that caused a lot of collective trauma, and we need to start making it easier to talk about openly in a sense of a problem that needs treatment. We should be suggesting these people see a counselor, but not in like a gaslighty way or whatever, just in a way of saying, look, this broke your brain, I get it. It broke everybody's brain. All of our brains are a little bit broken after that. But you will be a lot less distressed and you will have a more fulfilling life, and more importantly, you will be more able to rise to the challenges that come in the coming months and years if you work through this. And I think the psychological community in turn should also really work on different styles of treatment to kind of like tailor counseling to like pandemic related trauma. And right off the top of my head, mindfulness comes to mind. Dialectical behavior therapy is really great too. That's a combination of mindfulness and CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. But I think we need to make it more acceptable as a whole that this is like a serious mental disorder that a lot of people are going through, and it's an understandable one. It's not like, haha, these people were crazy before and now they're crazy again. They're just being crazy about a different thing. They're just crazy libs. I don't think that's it. I think this is more a serious traumatic event that I think a lot of people should be given the grace and the compassion to actually get treated and take seriously. So that's just food for thought, but I just feel like that's something that hasn't been talked about a lot. The psychological and mental health implications, the lingering psychological implications of the pandemic as a whole. I feel like a lot of people might still be stuck in that era. And I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen it on, Twitter or maybe Facebook, maybe you know someone, again, where they're still like freaking out every day. Like, oh my God, you got a mask. Someone wasn't masking. Oh my God, I can't go out to a restaurant. Everybody's immunocompromised suddenly, I guess. But like, it's like, there's like this level of health anxiety. This is like the WebMD hypochondriacs. Well, in a lot of ways, that's kind of it as well. Because a lot of being a hypochondriac can possibly have its root in trauma as well. These are people who are traumatized. I don't think anybody, listen, I'll put it this way. I don't think anybody wakes up and goes, gee golly, I want to panic every day about a certain thing. I want to feel distress on a daily basis. I don't think anybody signs up for that. I don't think you would opt into that. Because why would you? Life under capitalism is already stressful enough. The world is already in a distressing place. Why add more distress to that? Right? So, that's just something I guess I want people to consider. I've already kind of suggested it to a couple people in my life, and I've definitely had some interactions with people online where I'm kind of like, maybe you should actually like legitimately see a counselor about this. There's this one guy that like he blocked me because I suggested as such, like, please see a counselor. But like, I literally like, he was literally like every day he was doing nothing but posting about COVID, like 8 hours a day, just nothing but COVID. And it was after the rollout, after the lockdowns were lifted, after numbers like went all the way down, get all these things like it's not over, guys, like they just stopped testing, like it's already over here, it's everywhere, I'm scared. Way after this kind of should have been in the rear view mirror for people. And I just kind of seriously suggested, like, dude, I'm not even judging, but I think you need to see a counselor. And he decided, you know what, like, nope, I need to live with my trauma, and I'm going to attack people who try and help me work through the trauma. Which is a common problem with people who are traumatized that, unfortunately, you just need to have a lot of patience about. But I digress. I guess my main point is I think we as a society need to start taking this a little bit more seriously. Because I feel like a lot more people felt like it was okay to seek counseling about this and accept that this was an event that completely understandably affected you in a serious way. I feel like we'd be a lot better for it, and we'd be able to move forward in a more productive light.